guess I'm walking out on a limb there. But at any rate, there is, they are promoting the parks measure and promoting our community parks in that way while we're here. And so I appreciate what that Parks and Trails Committee is already doing. And one of the representatives that leads the Parks and Trails Committee is here with us today to talk about measure number 3, Karen Borchert.
I am one of those members that would probably rather be at the park right now. Hopefully my husband did actually take my kids there. But it's actually, I actually am excited to be able to be here today. I think this is a very important measure. And because, like I said, I have 3 kids, and it's part of the reason that we moved here is because of the common grounds, the parks, and the pools, and the beaches, and the areas that we have here is one of the big draws for my family and I when we moved here 3 years ago. Since moving here, I have gotten involved in a few committees. I sit on the ACC, and approximately a year and a half ago, I joined the Long Range Planning Committee, and I see a few people out here that were on that committee with me. And we set up a subcommittee. One of those was the Parks and Trails Subcommittee, and we started about writing a report to put together a plan. It was supposed to be a long-range plan for the parks. As part of that, we went to each of the 21 named parks. We tried to find as many trails as we could, and we did an inventory, and we looked at how, what the status of each of these parks were, what condition they were in, and what needed to be done to improve them. We also reviewed the 2004 community plan, which was a phenomenal plan. If anyone gets a chance to read it, you want some light reading, I do encourage you to look at it because you can see the hard work and the dedication that a lot of people in this community have and have had for years. But what was really sad about reading that report was that in the 12 or so years from the time it was first written until I was reading it, with very few exceptions, nothing had been done. Stairways that were written in the 2004 plan that needed to be fixed up were in further decay. Simple things like picnic tables being added to a park were not there. These were simple things. They weren't really expensive things, but not much had been accomplished. And so we kind of asked ourselves why hadn't this been done? And the reason really was that no funding had ever been tied specifically to parks. I think Carol said this past year was the first year that parks ever had its own line item, and it was $50,000, and without kind of that background, you really don't even know where to start. So we kind of broke the rules a little bit, and we were supposed to be writing a long-range plan, but we asked for some very specific short-term goals. Those 2 things were, one, to really reestablish, we'd had parks committees in the past, but to reestablish a parks committee, and that was done this past summer, and Carol Trower and I were the founding members of that, and since we've added several more very talented, very knowledgeable people. And the second one was to ask for parks to be funded, for the maintenance and such to be funded. So that's where we are today, talking about funding for parks and trails and common areas, and even the adult pool. So this is a 5-year special assessment. It starts out at $4.74 in 2018 per month for each developed lot, and it's $4.53 for the undeveloped lots. It has built into it a 3-year 3% inflation escalation, which means that each year it will grow a little. So by the time we get to 2022, instead of paying $4.74, you're paying $5.36. So it's less than $1 difference, but that's just to make sure that we are continuing to improve the maintenance that we're doing, or at least holding it still, and we're not losing ground due to things such as inflation, cost of employee costs increasing, and other unexpected things like that. So the total budget for 2018 is $165,000. That compared to maybe $50,000 they had in the budget this year, and unknown, probably almost nothing in the previous years. This includes, it's a big group of things that it includes. It is our parks. Like I said, there's 21 named parks that we have. Some are more used than others, some are more developed than others. It includes our beaches, of course, as well. Trails, the most known is probably Lake Louise Trail. We actually have several different trails that go through. Some are like deer trails, some are others, but the plan is to hope to improve those so that we have a better used trail system. It includes playgrounds and gate entrances and all those things that you would expect, also mailboxes and things like that. It's the mowing and the regular maintenance that you would expect, plus a couple other things, which is making sure that the playground equipment is safe, that the equipment itself is safe, that the bark and mulch underneath and ground cover underneath is sufficient and up to code. I think there's been several moms that I've talked to that said, like, in the 7 or so years that they've lived here since their kids were babies, it has never been up to that level, so we're hoping to get it up to standard. And one of the other things that I'm most excited about is a revitalization of one park per year. So looking back at that 2004 plan where there really wasn't much progress made, we could see a lot of progress over 5 years. And the last thing is the adult pool. There is just a small amount of money required from each person to pay that would fund the operations of the adult pool. And going with this, it would then be free for all adults over age 21 or older to be able to use. So I think that that's a good win for the community. It will definitely be a benefit to us. So, is this going to cover everything? Like I said, we have 21 named parks, an unknown amount of trails, some of which I haven't even been able to find. The answer is no. It's a very, very good start. It's going much further than we've ever gone in the past. But this won't necessarily cover everything to be in a pristine condition, and this is where the community comes in. You can go ahead and move to, the committee comes in. You can go ahead and go to slide 2. As I said, we have established a Parks and Trails Committee, and we will assist in helping to prioritize how this funding will be spent by the association so we get the most use out of our dollars. Part of that is to prioritize, which parks or which areas we should spend the most money on, probably starting with the higher profile areas, of course. Some of our parks you might not even know exist. Some of them are very hard to find, and we do hope to improve everything, but we'll probably start with those higher use, higher profile areas. So that's our goal, is to start to see improvement into to working with the board and with staff, formulate a plan for spending the funding. The next goal would be to solicit and coordinate volunteer efforts. So there are a lot of things, and community volunteering is a great thing for the community to have. It just kind of enhances the whole overall feel of the community, but there's a lot of things that we as community members can do that we don't need to pay to do, because we can do it and we even might enjoy it, and we can meet our neighbors and have a potluck after or whatever, but it builds a lot of community spirit, and we get things done without having to use association funds to do that. So we hope to be able to tap into some of that has already been done. There are some parks that are maintained, just meticulously, solely by neighbors, and we hope to expand that and also kind of coordinate some of these volunteer efforts. Having the committee also provides some continuity. As of right now, actually, the committee is only an ad hoc committee. We are only chartered for 1 year, so we have to be rechartered again next year. With the establishment of funding, particularly long-term funding, we would have the opportunity to put on the 2008 ballot measure to become a standing committee, so that with the funding intact for 5 years and a standing committee, we have these two things working together where we can continue to provide oversight and guidance and the planning that is needed to have a really robust parks system here. Along with that too, as I kind of mentioned, oversight, we can have hopefully be able to provide some meaningful feedback in how our dollars are being spent, and people to be able to see improvements, even if you're not going to each of these parks frequently, like some of those with young kids might be doing, to be able to communicate in a meaningful way what is being done and the improvements that are being made. And the last one is the budget, which I've kind of already spoken about, is having a budget, having funding tied to the parks, and having the committee that has some oversight over this is really key into moving forward. So before moving on to questions, I want to cover a couple of things. Questions that might have been asked and that I've seen asked on social media. So a few people have asked, why a special assessment? Why not just put this directly into the budget? For one, it's never been budgeted before, so any money that's put into parks would have to be taken from somewhere else. That makes it pretty tough to start from zero and to come up with it. Currently, we've been paying for most parks funding through UDR funds, which are quickly drying up as our collections rate increases. Our UDR funds decrease, if I believe I'm stating that correctly. The second and most important thing, or one of the most important things, is that a special assessment fences in the money in a way that just a regular budget or a dues increase even tied to the budget would not do. So the way that a special assessment is worded, this money can only be spent for this purpose for the next 5 years. So long as a special assessment is in place, it can only be used for these stated things. So it doesn't matter who's on the board, who's on the staff, how bad our winter is, what happens to golf, whether it's, the losses are increasing or decreasing. None of those things matter. This money can only be spent for these specific things. And parks is an important thing to our community, as many people have stated. And this seems to kind of protect the money in a way that I think is beneficial to our community. Then another thing is that we'll be able to carry over from year over year. I don't know if you guys have ever had like a flexible spending account versus a health spending HSA. And so when you get to the end of your year in your FSA, you lose the money if you don't use it. And but if you have a HSA, it kind of carries over year after year. So you don't have this like feeling of like, oh, okay, I have $100. I'll just get new glasses because I could use them. That's fine. And this happens in businesses too. It's not unique to Sun Valley. Actually, I'm not sure how much it happens here, but I worked in finance for 10 years, and every company that I worked for, you get this fourth quarter spending spree where people just felt like if I don't use this money, it's going to go away. And so they'll spend things on maybe not the best priorities. Or another thing that can happen is, say this department has some money left, but we have, a pothole here, it gets taken out and it gets moved over here. So with the money being fenced and with it being able to carry year over year, you get some really good strategic planning on how to spend the money the best. And planning is an important part of it. It allows us to plan for the year. We can start the day after this passes to be able to plan for the future years when hiring, the employees in place to do the work on day one when it starts, and also carrying that through to 5 years to really looking strategically and for the best benefit of the community, how to spend this money so that we can see benefits from it. And lastly, as I mentioned before, it builds the foundation for a standing committee, which we have never had, and it provides that continuity. So without a budget or funding tied to parks, the committee can still continue to do its work, but we're just coming up with a wish list, just like the 2004 plan. It's a long list of things that we hope to accomplish, but if we don't put the actual funding to it, we don't really have the foundation to ask for a standing committee because we don't know if we'll have budgets, and the momentum that we're getting kind of just falls off. So I feel like we're at a really good place now, and I don't want to wait. A few people have mentioned to me, well, I agree, we need to spend the money on parks. I'm just not ready yet. I want to have people on the board that I can trust. And that's not to say that you shouldn't vote for absolutely who you trust. It is hard to turn your money over to someone else and spend it in the way that you think is the highest priority. But the two votes are not mutually exclusive. You can analyze parks and see what's the most important, beneficial for the community there, and also your selections for the board. But if we wait another year to see what happens, the board will get elected, and let's say that it's your dream team of the board. They get right to work. They start finding those savings, looking for them. It's probably going to take a few months to get that done. But the board itself can't implement these changes. That has to come from the GM. Let's say even he's on board too, and we start moving through this process of finding savings in order to fund parks. A lot of things are contractual. We can't realize the savings right away. If let's say it's Insurance benefits, well, that contract is up, I'm making this up. Let's say that's up at the end of the year, because most companies are. So we wouldn't even see those savings until the end of the year. A lot of things are like that, where you can't just immediately realize the savings. And the hiring needs to start for parks and trails maintenance probably in March or April, in order to get the best people and know they're going to be there through the summer. So what savings will we have realized by March or April of next year if we don't really already have that funding? Our budget process starts in July, and we do it conservatively. So if we haven't actually realized the savings in order to find parks, what's the budget going to be next year? And then the whole process starts again. In November, we have a new board and a new budget and new priorities. And that momentum that we're getting now starts to fall, it falls off, and we just stay in limbo like we've been since 2004. In limbo with our parks, not having funding tied to it, not having a committee, and not having a real clear path going forward. But if this passes, the committee can get started day one, kind of prioritizing where we're at, taking an assessment, and really figuring out what is the most important for us to work on in 2018, 19, 20, and on and on. We can put together a good, strong, robust plan, and we can start it on day one. And we don't have to continue to be in limbo like we have been. So I'm just asking everyone as a plea, I don't want to wait until my kids are in high school to see the cushion material up to standard or Treehouse Park to be rebuilt. I would like to be able to realize these, as well as many of the other community members here, see these improvements being made. So I would just ask everyone to please have an open mind. Definitely be informed about each of the measures. Consider them independently from each other. I sort of feel like we're at the cusp of something very great, honestly. The stars are almost aligning, where I can see all of the things that, as I sat working with the committee back in 2016, that was just a subcommittee of another committee, and thinking of the things that would need to happen in order to really get the ball rolling. We're there, we're at that moment, and we have the forward momentum that we need. The last piece that we need is the funding. And having it as a special assessment, whereas dedicated funding for 5 years is probably the best situation that I could ask for. In 5 years, if this is passed, I see a future where we're not still in limbo, but where we can actually all be able to see noticeable improvements that we can all be very proud of. So I thank you very much for your time, and I would just like to ask if there's any questions about parks.
I'm Sunny Bull, Loganberry Lane. First, I want to preface my question with, I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I agree with everything that you're saying 100%, and I think it's a fantastic idea to open the pool to the whole community. That seems to have been an ongoing issue, it seems like, for years and years, the pool. My concern with this measure is that in there is that we have roadside mowing is actually in there. And so you're talking about roadside maintenance of 40 miles is included, and $86,000 of that number that you're talking about is salaries, which means that's also going to fuel and salaries too. It seems like that should be under operations and not under your parks, and that concerns me. I'm not saying don't vote for this measure.
Right.
I understand the dollar amount. I'm just concerned that shouldn't be there.
So when I read it, and someone can clarify if I'm wrong here, it says year-round mowing, trimming, and weeding. I am not seeing in here, we do talk about gate entrances. I'm not seeing in the measure where we're talking about roadside.
I'm so sorry. The way I have it, I'm so sorry. On the AGM measures, it actually shows 40 miles of road mowing, is what it says.
Why don't we talk afterwards? I've got the booklet right here, and we can talk about that. My understanding is that it's not roadside mowing, but the mowing is related to these areas, which are the parks, the beaches, the mailbox clusters, the gate entrances. I mean, you might consider some of the mailbox clusters and the gate entrances roadside, But my understanding was that it was not necessarily the 40 miles of road, and we'll kind of take this offline and just talk about it specifically.
I'll just speak to it just a touch. The measure itself is for the common areas, primarily parks and trails and the adult pool. Other things will be included, such as gate entrances, they're common areas. The parks are all common areas, gate entrances are common areas, the post-box clusters are all common areas. So this primarily is intended to make spiffy what people see and what people use. So yes, some road mowing will be in there, but not necessarily every square inch along all 40 miles of the road. Not all of it needs mowing. But that's why it is in there specified, is because it's to make clear that the money is for the common areas that belong to the community.
I'll just say this. There is no really detailed, specific plan laid out on how this money will be spent yet. We kind of have to get the funding in order to really put together the plan. So whereas the parks, I can only speak for myself, but where we probably have ideas of where we should prioritize the money first. And, administration has asked that of us to, when we first formed the committee, we would really like some help in some of this prioritization. We have not yet worked with the board or with the administration to put those priorities in place. So like Larry says, yes, if we determined that everyone kind of agreed that, that's where we should spend it, but if not, I think that would need to come from another fund. Any other questions?
Mary Haslam, 10 Shetland Court. Thank you so much for this. I think my grandchildren are too old to use parks when they come to visit, but I recognize that we have so many families with children here, and not only for the parks, but all of the common areas. So thank you for doing this, and I do hope it passes. My question is about, this is a 5-year assessment. And what I would like to see, and I don't know how we would make that happen, is to have this a permanent dues increase. And is that possible in the future? So that it would be designated for this particular thing.
Yeah. Anything is possible with the future vote, obviously, in 5 years. But I think what this really gives us is it's committed for 5 years, so nothing can really throw this off. We can plan for 5 years, and if we find out it's too little or too much, I'm not thinking it's too much, but if it's too little, when we come and ask for a dues increase, we can have a pretty solid idea of what it's really going to take, and also have gathered some of that community feedback of how much do we want the association to pay for versus how much are we willing to do ourselves. And there's not really a right or wrong answer for that. It's just what are our expectations versus what are we willing to pay for, and finding that bottom ground. And I think over the next 5 years, it's 5 years of dedicated funding and hopefully a standing committee that can be really involved in this. And I really think that in 5 years we could have a really good plan put together for something like that.
Elizabeth Huthert, 8 Westbrook Court. I'm up by gate 13, which has never had anything done to it. It's been the bastard gate of Sudden Valley for like over 30 years. And it's the first one people come to, so I think definitely gate 13 should get some spiffing up. You have the adult pool in with this. Is it possible to get that enclosed?
Get the adult pool enclosed.
So we could use it year-round?
Oh, like I said, I think anything is possible with the amount of funding and with enough community support behind it. I don't know how much that would cost. Like I said, right now, there is no definitive plan going forward. We want to get community input. We want to get community support. And then you always have to do a cost-benefit analysis on something like that. And also, I have to thank Elizabeth was one of the members of the subcommittee of long-range planning that helped put this Parks report together that was the precursor to the current committee that we have going now. So she did a lot of work on that, and I appreciate it.
I don't know how much work I did, but it was really a very enjoyable committee because I got to go out. I found parks I had never heard of, never seen, saw the original plans from the contractor. 21 parks. Sudden Valley was originally planned for 21 parks. And of course, some of them were never done, but it's fascinating. So I think it's a fun committee.
It really is. Come
Thank
join
you.
it again.
Hello. Penny Bamford, 46 Maple Court. I missed the Maple Park in order to come here. I moved here about 5 years ago. I love walking. I went and went to the committee on parks and trails to find out about trails and found that they were all in bad repair and repairs were being planned. Everyone would turn up on Saturday and do some raking. And then we were all told, no, we can't. The council has said we can't do it without a right permit, and the permit would cost more money than anybody had. Has anybody else heard this tale?
I do know that there is a county requirement related to dirt work that is 500 square feet or more. So if you were going to go and build a whole trail between October and the end of May, sure, probably not. I don't know how or if that even applies to maintenance of an existing park, particularly if you're not doing a lot of dirt removal work. I can't really see how that would be applicable. It's more for like excavating and things like that. The one challenging thing about the trails is that they are in really bad condition, and I do think there is a little bit of expertise needed in taking a trail from a deer trail to an actual walkable, safe trail. I am not that expert, but we do have people. I believe Carol actually has Carol Trower, Eric's wife, has quite a bit of experience in trail work, and I think that's part of the reason why she is involved in this committee. And there are a few others that do have that kind of thing, but it's a little bit trickier than just taking a park with a playground and saying, oh yeah, we need some new equipment, or we need better mulch. You know, it takes a little bit more, maybe not engineering, but a little bit more thought into that. So it's been a slower start, I think, than some of the trail work, but we love to have people that have an interest in that, and definitely people that have an expertise as well are welcome to. I can't say for certain. If the area was below the 500 square feet and it wasn't involving significant dirt work, I can't imagine that that would be required. But I am not an expert on that whatsoever.
I was just going to say, some of the areas the county won't allow you to touch, you know, like because there's a conservation easement, even though they're owned by Sudden Valley and their common areas are green space, but we still can't build on them or make trails through them, and then that may be why, you know, you ran into an issue, perhaps.
That's
on
possible.
that.
Critical areas, wetlands, and stuff like that come with a whole separate set of things. And like I said, if you're starting from scratch and rebuilding a whole trail, or really like expanding an existing kind of deer trail, there might be a lot more complication in it at all. I'm not an expert in that field, though, so I'm not exactly positive about that.
Thank you, Larry. Karen. Clive Allen, Gate 3, sorry. I'm a little concerned about the volunteers, because Sudden Valley has kind of a bad record of volunteers. They want to do stuff and then nothing happens. So I'm a little concerned about that, but I'm all for this program. Believe you me, I am. And the second thought I had was, on the screen it said the standing committee for the duration of the period. At the end of the 5-year period, does the committee go away, or what happens?
It would really depend on how that was worded on the measure when it's put on the ballot. So I think we could do it either way so that we are a committee so long as we have funding, or we could ask to be a committee perpetually. It really just depends on how the ballot measure, and I'm not an attorney either, so I don't know which would be best.
Diane Riley, I'm 39 Green Hill. I guess I'm getting this thought that I wish there was a plan. And so one of my thoughts is it'd be nice to know if all of these areas would be addressed, like maybe equally, or, you know, be assured that some percentage of this will go each year to this or that. You know, like I could see how all the money will go to like the adult pool and the playgrounds and nothing to trails. So it'd just be nice to have some assurance that all of them will be addressed to some extent, and it won't just be, you know, one thing, because one thing could suck all that money up.
Well, you're welcome to join our committee. We're, as far as I know, taking members, and you're always welcome to just come as a community member and provide your feedback. And that's the kind of thing that we hope to also actively seek to get. One thing I'll say is I'm pretty sure the adult pool costs like $10,000 or $11,000 to operate. So this is basically for operations funds. So I can't see that sucking it all up. But how it gets distributed among the parks and the trails and all of that stuff, you're right. It's a difficult task to do all of that, and so we do need as much community feedback from that as possible to really see what is going to be the most beneficial to the community. And like I said, we might probably start with some of the high-profile areas that are definitely behind in their maintenance, and then hope to work through that and get to see improvements on things that haven't had attention in years. And there's already some good plans for things like that being discussed. No specific plans in place, but parks that, you know, are pretty much just overgrown right now, making those into usable things. And parks are not just playgrounds. You know, it's not just for little kids. Some of the things being discussed right now by the community are actually, you know, more of like walking paths, or, you know, things for more of an adult crowd to enjoy, rather than just kids and playgrounds and swing sets and things like that. Any others?
I just want to make a comment. Somebody talked about volunteers and how kind of hit or miss that could be. Carol Trower and Karen Borchert are two of the most charismatic, energetic, passionate people about parks and trails I have ever met. And they will, I promise you, if you volunteer for their committee, you will be put to work. They have good organizational skills, and I'm convinced that, I don't know how many of you are aware of all the volunteer work that's gone on at the golf course this year. Chuck Luttrell has amassed some 300 volunteers to do all kinds of beautification efforts, plantings, pulling out trees and that sort of thing. And I would say that Carol and Karen can hold a candle to him. So I guarantee if you get involved, you're going to be busy. The other thing is that there was a question about the road mowing. The mowing is for, if you read your measure, it's not about road mowing, it's mowing of all these gate areas and so forth, and all of the things that kind of are hit or miss. And it is going to be up to the park committee to help prioritize some of those. So road mowing's done. It may not be done more than once a summer because it's a big project. I know the county doesn't do it more than maybe once. So that sort of thing has to be done for water runoff. But as far as that, that's an ongoing maintenance issue. But the things that we're talking about is mowing of the parks more often than maybe once a year. And that will be up to the Parks Committee to help direct it. So if you want a better plan, get involved and help create that plan, because we're going to have the funds available. We have to make sure that they're used in the highest priority items, and that that they address the needs of the majority of the people and the desires. Thanks,
you.
Karen.
Thanks,
You did a
Karen.
great job.
Any others?
Just one from me.
Okay.
So what happens if this doesn't pass? And that's for
Okay.
the both of you. She's treasurer and you're on
Yeah.
the committee.
If this doesn't pass, my understanding is the budget is zero. What has been used to fund it before is UDR funds, which are dwindling quickly. And so any money that would be spent on parks would have to come from savings somewhere else that they would find in the future, is my understanding. So the focus would be on first finding the savings and being able to move that money over to parks versus actually getting started, getting people ready to maintain the park. So it completely changes the focus. If this isn't passed, we're scrambling to find the money, and then if it's found, putting something together versus actually putting together a good and robust plan for maintaining our parks for next year and for the 4 years after that. So it's undesignated revenue. Reserves.
Again, undesignated reserves comes from past dues and assessments from a prior year that are collected in this year. The surf monies go to surf, the roads go to roads, but the operational income from that past due stuff goes into UDR. And at 96% collection rate now, the UDR income is shrinking.
Anything else? We're good? Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, and I just wanted to mention one thing before I wrap up and summarize here, that Karen has been on the Architectural Control Committee for the last year and is running again right now, and with one vote she will be elected again. And so congratulations. And, and Bruce is in the same boat. So we have those two here. We also have some candidates here today that I'd like to recognize and appreciate their volunteering to involve themselves in the community. And that would be myself, Eric Trower, Sue Noida, Sears Taylor is back there. Richard Walkie is back in the corner. And Leslie McRoberts up here. So thank all of you. Let me summarize here the 2018 ballot measure. It's a balanced budget. This last year's budget was also a balanced budget. And that means that we're not asking for a dues increase to balance the budget. We're absorbing the increases of the costs that we have for this next year, and this last year we absorbed the increases through cost-saving efforts and by having a conservative plan. Now, our rate of collections has also been something that has helped us maintain a balanced budget. Was it maybe 3 years ago even, our rate of collections was in the mid-80% range. And since we've hired collection staff, that has shot up dramatically, and that is one of the reasons, as Larry said, that our undesignated reserve fund doesn't have the long-term expectation of income because people aren't getting behind as much as they used to. We're collecting. And so that's where parks had typically been funded. And so the writing on the wall is, got to find money for parks from somewhere. Now, major project not on the ballot, I spoke about the safety of our association members and preventing the loss of those assets is the reason that those aren't on the ballot. Measure 2, roads, ensures the viability of our roads for the next 10 years. And the measure 3, the parks and trails, which Karen just spoke about, and common grounds and adult pool operations, establishes the parks and grounds as a fenced budget for the community. And the roads is also a fenced budget. So, any further questions? Well, great, thank you, and thank you to our remote viewers. I just got the report from Summer back there that we started out with over 100 people watching in the community. And so that, we did have some technical difficulties. The internet keeps glitching, just like our audio seemed to, but there are still people watching right now. So thank you very much for attending, and for those of you who haven't voted, or vote early, and this is the one place where you can vote often if you have lots and lots. So thank you.